right down here through the neck. You'll see the scar right through the neck and over to the heart.
Dumps into the heart.
And the others went into the stomach. His stomach rejected everything, and this heart takes it. And if anything ever happens, the Dr. Peterson said the other day, this shunt will always be a threat to his life. Because if he ever gets sick or ever gets an infection, and if it goes from the shunt, gets into the shunt and to the heart, then if it gets into the lungs, it will take him. But he is healthy now. He's well. There's no, to my knowledge, infection or fever. But he does have a lot of problems with his left hip. We have not seen any life in the left leg yet.
Well, there's a little bit.
That's because of nerve reflex. It's not real movement yet. We have not seen any movement in the toes or anything, but he says it's coming because he can feel it in there.
When did this all start? What day?
November 17th.
What would have happened, Barbara, if it would have been a day later?
Dr. Reichman says that he would have died in our arms and we would have never known.
On the airplane or in
airplane.
Israel?
He says it was evident that this was going to happen. I asked him what caused it, and he says it was an acute thing. It's where the vessel, the blood was flowing through the vessel. It had branched off into some branches like this, like a beanie flipper, and right here in the branch, a little bubble developed. And where the blood just kept flowing, it kept hitting that little balloon. He called it like a balloon, and it kept hitting the balloon, and the balloon got larger and larger over the years. And how long it took for this to happen, and then on November 17th, that little balloon ruptured. And they're rare. Most all of aneurysm patients die with just the aneurysm. But I think there is purposes to be accomplished. Jay's got another mission ahead of him. My mission is to assist him, and I'm grateful for this opportunity. I can't tell you how grateful I am. And Bernie and Sarah and Jay and I are going to work this out together. And Bernie's going to move to Utah.
Don't tell us.
With all of his kids.
If I do, I'll move up there and tend to Jay. I'll help you out, Barbara.
Well, his back's not already broken.
Sometimes Jay's leg bounces, Barbara.
Yeah, that means he's uncomfortable.
Oh, okay.
And he's hurting.
Oh, okay.
But he'll never complain.
But I've put a new tape in there now. Okay. Thank you, Barbara and Jay. Oh, that's fine. I think, like Beth, I think all of us want a record of both of these tapes. They're very faith-promoting. I can see why you could do so much good in the conditions that you're in. I reflect back on the conditions that I went through from the plane wreck, and it's actually been a tremendous attribute to me as a teaching process, and I use it often. But as members of the family, the Lord hasn't promised any of us that we wouldn't have problems, that this body of ours wouldn't fail in certain parts. But He has promised us that if we're faithful, He would help us through them. He would help us through them. And but what we want to extend our appreciations to you for is for giving us, as members of the family, the opportunity to exercise our faith. We don't get to do it enough. And I have a feeling, a strong feeling, that the Lord, when something happens to people in a ward or in a family, I think that the Lord capitalizes upon that and makes sure that as many people as possible benefit from it. And so we offer to you our thanks and our appreciation for the privilege of exercising our faith. In our family prayers, it is always mentioned, little David always mentions Sarah and Jay. Always does in our family prayers, and it's great.
Bill,
we need it. Yes.
Bill, I've been seeing that Sarah and Jay's names are in the temple
In the Salt Lake, yeah.
Mhm.
And making sure they're in there.
See, this is added faith and added strength that we need, and we appreciate it. Did you have a question, Bob?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that on the trust fund that was set up, I just talked to Barbara before we came over here, and so far there's been a little over 14,000 into the trust fund from both sides of the family, from the ward, from the stake, and the counselors have come in really well too. There is a need right now because she estimated that the total project would be more like 20,000, and so I thought that maybe we could get an envelope going today or tomorrow, and that we could give it to Barbara so that she wouldn't be overdrawn Monday from some of the bills that she has had to pay. Is that true?
If you don't, somebody else will, because the Lord has just blessed us, so don't worry. I'm serious, we're okay. Even if I take out a loan, I'll still make that too. So
No, don't take out a loan.
No. Well, anyway, thank you, you two. Okay, like I mentioned earlier, for some reason, we as family members had the idea that we would never get old. That we'd always be young and vibrant and able to do things, to run and not be weary, and to walk and not faint. But somehow these physical bodies do get old and they wear out. And so I have asked our brother Jay to give us some things and some feelings that we can do to better take care of our bodies in our older age. You know, we forget it. And I catch myself, and poor Joyanne, she tries to watch me a little more than she ever has, but I catch myself just totally wore out as I walk around and enjoy the beauties of the place that I have fixed up. And I get very, very tired very quickly. And if you, from the plane wreck, if you saw my two legs here, you would cry like I did this morning as I looked at them in the mirror. They look like toothpicks and they're getting smaller. And so I think there's some deterioration going there, but as long as I can walk, do things, I'm grateful. I'm grateful, and I'm just going to do it as long as I can. But Jay, we would like to turn some time over to you to visit with us and give us a little bit of your experience, why you had your heart attack, how it could have been prevented, and how we can help ourselves to make sure we don't have the same problems.
We wanted to stop for just a little while and get a break, or
No?
keep going? Keep going.
Where is the thing? I have something that I must read. Where is the stand? Yes, please.
We'll be right back.
This has all been so strangely beautiful.
We'll be right back.
Well, that's why I was thinking we got now about 3 of them gone.
All right, let's hold. Let's hold. Let's hold. What I have is very important too.
Yeah.
Let me shut this off.
I'd turn it off.
How do you do it, Bill?
They'll be back.
Bill,
They'll be back.
You need your...
you got your tips.
I want to tell you.
It doesn't hurt to have it run.
On hold.
All right.
The green light is on.
Has it been going all the time? I hope it's been going.
No, I think it's still going because this is... Oh, that won't make any difference. That's just automatic focus.
Sure this is going to be modest?
Modest? I want to try.
I go all when he was speaking today about
If you want it to go closer or further away,
Yeah.
that's this. Tilt. This is a tilt back and forth. It does that too.
How do you go, Jay? Yeah.
You know what? It's going to be really hard to lift him back up off of the floor.
We'll do it. We got a lot of bodies.
Bob? Bob? slide over.
No lifting for you yet.
I'm gonna move.
You hear me?
I'm gonna go down to the floor right by Mom.
Mom, you got a friendly attack?
Get out of the way.
Talmadge, did you get a drink of water? Honey, I did, thank you.
Is he okay? Get him over farther.
I don't want any of them.
Yeah, let's pull it down a little bit. You all right?
Did you get that, sir?
Would you like to put this with you?
Bill?
Oh, it's
No,
there.
He has to use this in order to avoid
Sore spots.
sores. All the pressure sores come if you don't use something
Yeah.
like
Breaking
this.
developing on his left side.
Does he needs a pillow or something under this arm. That arm's hanging down low.
Okay, we'll
Put
get
a couple of pillows under it.
Okay, we ready?
Just one.
Jay, how about this rest
Where's Sarah and
No, he
Bertie?
needs a pillow.
I think they're doing bathroom.
Don't you girls remember your Relief
Why
Society
don't you just go
lessons?
ahead, Jay?
How's that feel? All right, Dave. Are you gonna go to sleep on us?
No, he's not.
You'll be asleep in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I know.
I think it's part of the
Make the
medication.
window go a little bit down, a little bit.
Barbara, where do you want to sit?
I'm gonna go right down here.
Where's Sarah?
Did Jerry you, but
We gotta get Sarah. Hey, just
Hello?
online.
I don't know who was sitting back here.
Beth, why don't you and Wendell come over here so Sarah can be over there?
Let me have
Sarah's gonna come out here.
versus is. Joanne is
Close.
not in here.
Honey, you can come over here.
No, I think it's all right with it there.
Come sit here.
How Wendell walks.
Hey, what's it gonna be?
You wanted a chair, Wendell?
No, it doesn't matter. I can sit right here.
Well, just so that your head, we might have to have you cut your head off.
I'm sorry, Ron, I stole your chair.
You're just fine. We'll have to use the musical chair.
Where were you enjoying the visit?
I don't know.
Honey, that's supposed to be Bernie and Sarah's. Is Sarah gonna lie down?
Now they want Sarah carried in here. She wants to lay down too.
Oh, okay.
Put her over there, honey. Put her over there.
How about put her on that?
Put her over there. It's too short. It's too short.
Well, how are we gonna get, we gotta lay down with Jay and on the floor.
That might not be too short.
No, for Bernie, she can put her head up on the pillow area.
Did not.
Left camera. Her head bob to the camera. Yeah? Let's move this chair right that way.
Then that way we'll get Sarah's wheelchair.
Okay.
Oh, they can carry her.
Jay,
Barbara, honey.
Put her there.
on your whole legs.
Testing.
Hey.
We're gonna hold this.
Sorry, Beth and Wendell.
What are they gonna do?
What about, put her right here?
We'll put her on that part we didn't get.
Bernie?
Bernie, put her over here.
You got to turn the tape on when they put the new tape in.
So what?
So we missed Bill's remarks.
You missed what?
No, that's
Bill's
okay.
remarks there at the
Jay in
last
the way,
call.
Bernie?
Well, do them over
But did they get Barbara?
All of Barbara.
Do Bill over again then, because I, you know,
Bill forgot to push the red button.
this is wonderful to have this.
Get that thing out of the
Get
way.
Bernie.
Let's walk that way and then let's walk
Get
back.
We'll
that
have to
stand
have
out
Jay
of the
run up the
way.
car and back before we can.
Ready?
Yeah, get the stand out of the way.
Yeah, we got it.
Put her head on the
You're
left.
over here to the sofa.
I said they're meant to use the
Yeah,
middle.
give Barbara
No,
her
sorry,
legs.
Jay.
Got your legs.
Oops, let me get out of the way.
So it's on 3.
I wouldn't do that to you on 3, honey.
I don't trust him. You don't trust him? Cannot.
Barbara, are you going to be comfortable?
Yeah.
See, if you feel her legs, they're cold and they're just.
But I like something on them, but I don't like it. Feel me rubbing them? Do you feel me rubbing them? Yeah. Yeah, all of them.
Almost handicapped with mosquito bites you do.
Well, we got all these.
If you sit in.
Go ahead and have a seat there now. We got all this.
Put a warm blanket over them.
Shut all this.
I hate school. I just.
It's not time. Being forced to do
Are you comfortable, Jay? Here, are you comfortable? Yeah.
Well, all of you are learning an awful lot, the conditions that they're in, and they're slowly crossing paths here.
Well, we've
Jay's going one way, and
brothers and sisters, we've gotten Jay and Sarah in comfortable positions now so that they can enjoy the rest of our meeting.
Push you a little more.
I'm going to repeat a few things that I did because the tape was turned off from the last part. But we want to, speaking of all of the members of the family, we want to offer our sincere appreciations for allowing, for Sarah and Jay for allowing us to exercise our faith in their behalf. It has not done a lot. Conditions happen, some things happen in wards, giving us the opportunity to exercise our faith. But the Lord hasn't promised any of us that we wouldn't have problems, that these bodies wouldn't give up and deteriorate. But would you remember that He has promised that if we would remain faithful, He would help us through all these things, like He is helping Barbara and Sarah and Bernie and Jay. And we appreciate that. And like I mentioned earlier, we are getting old, each one of us. Our bodies are wearing out. We're not as young as we always wanted to be and acted like we would be. I remember not too long ago in another family reunion, we were out, and I remember seeing Jay here, and I've got pictures of it. And I don't know how old he was, but he was at least 60 or 65, but he had a bean flipper there, and he was just beating in on something. But you know, our youth and our young attitude is still with us, and I think that's important. But we are getting old, and so I've asked Jay to spend a little bit of time with us to let us know how we can better take care of our bodies in our elder age, and maybe a little bit of his experience as he had a heart attack, and to make sure that we don't go through the same thing. Jay.
That's your heart beating.
Jay, you're sure handsome.
Noisy body.
That's all.
Heart is yours,
You need to lubricate that heart.
Thank you.
You're missing a beat.
This has been so, how does that read?
very good.
This has been so strangely beautiful, so strangely sad and heart-wrenching and strangely wonderful that my situation doesn't even seem to fit in. When I was called, or when I was written a letter asking me to talk on health, a certain spirit took over, realizing how it was with me and how it is with me. And I researched that idea that hit me, and I have that. Perhaps you will forgive me on its seriousness. But I believe first that I'll tell you a quick note of what happened to me. No, I won't. I'll go on into this serious part first, and then I'll end up with this other, so that if there are some questions, we can cover that. Because of the seriousness of this message, it's best to be read. This way its value is lost. Stress is a #1 cause of illness today. That and arguing with yourself. I mean your spouse. Or bumping yourself. Things of that nature. Things you do throughout the day. Or otherwise. Because of this crisis facing mankind yesterday and today and, well, yes, and tomorrow, I have concluded a most exhaustive investigation on this subject. Here are some of the major points by which and for which and to which, if you will, at this point in time, in which, if they are indeed wise, will do more than the mere taking of notes, of which this report places at their disposal. You see, where was I? Oh, yes, the disposal. By the way, the 1 horsepower KitchenAid is a wonderful disposal. Of course, there is competition out there, shredders of various makes. The White House has several of them. They have them for everything as well, and for the lawn as well. They're going to eliminate trash, things, shall we say, things by which we are bugged. Yeah, Nixon did it. Clinton is doing it. I think most of the important people do. Really, quite a few VIPs. A disposal eliminates stress. Now remember, stress in your life. Now to these most valuable findings, of which, or by which, and from which, if you will, and obviously at this point in time, at which time, did I cover the witches?
You went through them twice.
I've been learning and practicing from the college kids. I hope you can see it. But you know, getting lost like this is a symptom of something. It's possible I forgot. I think I did once. Day before yesterday, Flo and I were in allvids, in the grocery store over here by Holiday. We bought a few things for the house, for the kids, for ourselves, and we went up to the place to check them out. And the only money I had in my pocketbook at the time was a $50 bill. I handed it to the man. He started working on it. And Flo says, "Honey, we left Cricket in the car." That's our little black Pomeranian dog. "I left Cricket in the car. I'll take these and go out and see how he is." So she took the groceries and scooted. I gave him the 50. He was working on the change and handed me the receipt, and I moved around the end. He started on the next customer. I put my change in my billfold, and I says, "Where's my groceries?" I saw no sack. "Where's my groceries?" He says, "Who was before you? Was it a woman? Was it a man?" "It was a man." He says, "Doris, come over here. Yeah, I need your help." He says, "Go out quickly in the parking lot and see if you can find that man. Did he take his groceries?" And so I stood there patiently watching, and all of the other tellers were watching to see that things were going to get taken care of. She zoomed out the back doors looking for this man that took my groceries. And so I was just patiently waiting. Pretty soon Flo came in, this door over here. She says, "What are you doing? We're waiting, me and the Cricket." I said, "Honey, did you take my groceries?" All of the tellers were waiting for the answer. Did Flo take my groceries? She says, "Yes." "Well, wait, how much longer are you going to be?" I apologized to the man. They all smiled and went back to their work. And I went on out. These are things you have to watch.
He won't go into the store that store again. Jay, I have a pamphlet on how to improve your memory. I forgot where I put it though.
Yes, good. Yes. Now to the results of this exasperating report. I mean this exaggerated report. I mean this exhaustive report. It says here, number 1, if you see your hair thinning out and moving back and loading up your comb, don't panic. Don't panic. This may be normal. And don't waste your money on these expensive ointments and shampoos. Buy stock. Yes, in hair pieces. Really, truly. This will do 2 things for you. This will keep the cash flowing. And face it, we all need cash flow. And it eliminates the stressful task of finding a safe place for all of that stagnant bread. I mean money. These are smelly stressful times. Number 2, when you go up or down the stairs, it makes no difference how many steps there are, what directions you're going, and you forget why you're going. Keep the problem to yourself. Merely ask yourself for the answer. Dee says, your concern is, do you know which way you were last pointed when you forgot? I say, far more important than which way you were pointed or what you forgot is to answer. Always answer, but never argue. Never argue. Let me see, I lost my place here. It's someplace here, I left it. Right there. Yes. Right. Remember stress. Stress. It's a bad one. Number 3. Over the years, there is a normal change in vision to a point in time when your eyes need help. We wear glasses. Not a thing to be alarmed of. It's normal. But if you have lost them, keep cool. Yes. Remember how your example affects others. Yeah. Simply brush your eyebrow. However, do it casually so as to not expose to the others what you are really doing. Remember stress, yours and theirs, and by whom it is noticed. Now, number 4. You're at the bottom of the page writing on another of your important subjects, a document or a letter, and you're at the bottom. I think I mentioned that. Yeah. You haven't said all that you want to say. What are you going to do? Here's what you do. You write an important word at the bottom of the sheet. And it's usually done over to the right-hand corner. That's over here. That's over here. At the end of the sheet. Write the word O-B-E-R. This will stimulate the memory at a handy time, and it reduces stress when you read through your work. It's good for your health, too. It saves you. Number 5. With the multitude of day-to-day interruptions we have in life, and life's not always easy, we occasionally need help from headaches, pains, this, that, and for this help, we rely on the pill. Usually 5 of them. 1 for each of these fingers. Oh, of course I know that's a thumb. Don't you think I know something? Now, back to relying on the pill. The pills, 5 of them. If a problem should arise at an acute moment in time, an interruption that destroys your normal routine of thought, perhaps the bread gets caught in the toaster and is smoking. Toasters aren't flawless, you know. Made in America, that kind of stuff. Or a buzzer goes off. Now this can really get to you. This buzzer goes off with absolutely no indication whatsoever of what it was set for. That will shake you. You know, life is full of unpredictables. Simply place your day's supply of pills in a neat little row. That's first. Put it in a place where there's quite a bit of traffic, so that you can notice them from time to time. Then, so that you don't neglect your good example in case someone should see you, you do the second thing. Put a toothpick between each pill. That's important. That way, the toast can go ahead and burn. You protect yourself and your vital count. And when all of your pills are gone, You know that you took them all. And your example in planning is good. It shows forethought, organization. Neat. Yet, you may experience a bit of concern over the cost of the toothpicks. What with your pill separations going on every day, on and on. Keep in mind, the whole world needs cash flow. And get this exciting part. This procedure allows for recycling. Yes. Oh boy. And we all know that the world needs recycled. Not just cash flow. Now, don't forget the purpose of this whole procedure. Use the toothpicks over and over. That's the way, in that way, they are there. Isn't this a beautiful way to be patriotic and save money? It keeps down the stress. It keeps down the stress. This also is good for your health. Now to your health, for real. For real. Remember Dean Edell's famous doctor, television and radio, his slogan, use it or lose it?
Oh, man.
There's a lot of truth in that. A lot of truth in that. I was told soon, right after my heart attack, is that what it was? My problem. To get off of red meats and animal fats, butter, cream, cheese, eggs, salt, jam, candy, cookies, pastries, and regular ice cream. I had it for breakfast.
You ruined my life.
That's what I'm saying. There are substitutes, you know. Dryers has non-sugar ice cream. The thing is this, you might need to lose weight, and believe me, if you get off of all these things, you're losing weight. But here's the thing that you can do. Be smart. Be smart. Be moderate. And then, when you indulge, make it with your family at special occasions. I was told that we must keep down, I don't know these people, keep down LDL. Some way, cholesterol and triglyceride and glucose got in the act. That's to keep those down. Whereas also to keep these fellows up. HDL. Maybe doctors will know. HDL. With proper diet and exercise, these clean out the pipes, and that's what all of us need from time to time. I've been threatening to stick up a station across the United States, not for cars, but for people. Just plug in, swish the pipes out. Good for another 50,000. Pardon me. Rheumatoid arthritis, runaway heart, are effects of lower immune system. Diabetes, thyroid disease called Graves' disease, are often in people, same people at the same time. They attack the immune system. Most serious diseases go with bloodline. Diabetes, hyper and hypoglycemia, and rheumatoid arthritis are in ours, the Packard lines. Let's tell our children, and remember this important part, diet and exercise. Diet and exercise. Did you get it? Diet and exercise. And you'll feel better, you will think better, you'll remember better. You might be able to save on the toothpicks a bit. Diet and exercise. Yes, I could have avoided mine, I think, but I'm better off now than I was before. I was experiencing angina every day. When I take the Cricket, that's this little Pomeranian, out for a walk, run, each day, I would feel angina, pain in here. It'd build up, and I would slack off and walk till the pain went away, and go again. Up, down, up, down, up, down. But I wasn't. I was a Packard. Before that, it was Carter's. Comes out of Mom's side. I wasn't paying attention to it. I was going to be smart and prove that I'm macho. I can handle it.
A little exercise didn't hurt anybody, right?
Right. So here's what happened. I went into an exercise. Now, I was on the bed. Flo was in the other bedroom. I was on the bed. I went into this exercise and do a lot of sit-ups and arm movements fast. I didn't stop when I got angina. I just kept going because I was behind about 3-4 days, maybe more than that. I was behind about a week in my exercising. And I wanted to catch up rather quick. We Packards have a tendency to do that, don't we? Yes. So I didn't stop. And when I wanted to stop, I couldn't stop because this kept on going. And I did what I had previously done on a runaway heart. I took a big, deep breath and I bared down real hard, like I was in the bathroom. And it didn't stop. I ran quickly, I still had a little bit of smart about me, ran quickly into my walk-in closet and I got me some of the nitrostat. And I stuck 2 under my tongue, went back to the bed.
What is that?
Nitroglycerin. And it's supposed to give the heart a charge, and it's a temporary fix until you can get in there for some help. It has saved a lot of people's lives.
It takes away the angina.
But these 2 pills didn't work. So I stuck 2 more in there. They didn't work. And by that time, I was wet all over. I was perspiring. And I called Flo. And I'm often calling Flo, find out why I went upstairs or why I went downstairs. And so she wasn't paying any attention. I called again. I said, Flo, get me to the hospital. And she came in and saw me sort of yellowish gray and all wet, scared her. She said, I'm calling the ambulance. I said, no, help me get these garments either off or on, do something so I can get into some clothes and get me to the hospital. She said, I'm calling the paramedics. My garments was right around the hips. When the paramedics got there, that's where my garments were. And there's too many curves to get the gurney up there to get me. So he says, if you got a little oak chair, by that time Ron, my son, second son, was there. So he hurried in there with one of these small little maple chairs, sat beside the bed, and they were scooting me off onto this little chair. And this black guy to my left, I slid my arm around his shoulder, and I said to him, listen, I got too much to do for to go now. You guys got to take care of me. He said, with an attitude like that, you're going to be all right. So in this chair, they took me outside, down the driveway, and the whole neighborhood there was watching to see what was going on. And Jay Packard's being carried out half naked to the ambulance. But all the way to the hospital, this black guy was whispering nice little messages into my ear. You're going to be all right. You're going to be all right. When I got there, I'm telling you, the operation was on right now. They already knew. They were all set up. Everybody was there. And they cut me down here in the groin and started shoving a pipe in me, something in me, and said, now listen, this will hurt a little bit, but don't pay any attention to it. We want you to hold your breath. No, above all, don't hold your breath. Don't grunt, don't strain. And he's killing me. He shoved that thing in there, and it did a ring around the rosy, up into my heart. Really. It sounds like an unbelievable story, but this is true. He got in there. They're watching two television screens up here on the wall. Not me. I'm trying to keep from holding my breath, keep from bearing down. It was hurting. The one guy said to the other one, said, there it is, just ahead of us, little farther, there, let's give it to it. And then the other fellow that was going to give it to me said, now this is going to hurt for a little bit. See if you can't stand it for 10 seconds. So he started pumping something up. I heard it, and at every pump it was hurting more. It was killing me. And he wants me to be quiet. Don't hold your breath. Oh dear, it was hurting. Only 10 minutes, believe me. I was counting them off, 10 seconds. And I breathed a sigh of relief when it reached the 10 seconds and the pain went away. He started all over again. Oh man. But then, just before he went in that next time, all the pain was gone. All the pressure was gone. And I knew that this changed and would start beating normal. And they went ahead and gave it the third time anyway. And then they finished up with me. They were in the meantime talking with Flo, giving, I guess, some instructions or bringing her up to date on what they were doing, what happened. And they rolled me into the recovery room. And then's when the ball started. I had a good time in that recovery room. I was their star patient. The only problem I gave them was I kept trying to raise up to tell stories. You get your head back down there. You lay down. I don't want you to pick up nothing.
Yeah.
She calls me motor mouth.
I go to the hospital and all the nurses will be around his bed. Good time.
On the second day, this cute little live wire blonde came in there. She was probably in her low 20s. She says, I'm supposed to interview you. And I says, well, I know who I am. Who are you? She says, well, I'm so-and-so, and I'm supposed to interview because I am training for paramedics to become one. I said, okay, fire away. And I raised my head up. Somebody from the doorway says, get that head back down. Well, we got going on our talk, and she was asking questions and writing down answers, and pretty soon she got so excited. She says, I promise you, next Sunday I will go to the church right down the street from where we live. She says, there's one in my area, I promise I'll go. I said, okay. We had the best time. We kept drifting off the subject, and then she'd say, listen, I'm supposed to ask you questions. And we'd get back on the subject again. The next day, two big, tall gals came in, one dark, one grayish. They looked like they had been running a woman's ward at a prison. One of them was giving me a lot of do's and don'ts pertaining food and exercise and all of that. The other one, she says, now, listen, they're going to come in here tomorrow. There's a chance you can be released tomorrow, but they're going to come in here and they're going to want to give you a bath. I don't want you to take a bath, not from them. I want to give you your shower. She said, now, if they give you a sponge bath, that is all right. Go ahead, that's all right. But I want to give you your shower. And I listened to all that. Now, I was wondering, believe me, I was wondering, well, then everybody else is gone. Tomorrow's here, and this gal comes in to give me my shower, and she informs me, now I want to give you your shower. And I thought, oh, for heaven's sakes, I have heard this right. How am I going to tell this to Flo? So she started out, she said, now when you get in the shower, there's a seat there. I don't want you sitting down. I want you standing up. I don't want either hand above your shoulders. I don't want you picking up anything. And I don't want you sitting down. I want the foot to come up to you, and you wash it. Then you set it down. I don't want you bending over for any reason. Do you understand me? I said, yes. Now, go ahead and take a shower. And she left. And I felt fine again. She gave me my shower. I had a fun time. But since all of that, I've had no pains, no angina at all. So here's what I watch very carefully: is my amount of exercise every day. I have to build up my heart rhythm to 17 to 18 beats for 10 seconds and hold it for 20 minutes. I blend into it, I blend out of it. We don't do what Ron did and charge into it like a Packard will do. Charge into it and catch up. Macho. Get on the stationary bicycle.
You did.
You've got to listen to the body. You've got to feel the body and be smart. Don't overdo it. We are getting, like Sven said, we're getting into those years where we have to be careful and smart and be willing to submit to something other than our own fiery will. Determination. So, I can't stress it enough. Diet and exercise. Diet and exercise. Be boss of yourself or you lose. And let's smart up our kids the best we can, our children, our grandchildren, so that their days will be as long as they're supposed to be. We can accomplish all we're supposed to do.
Say that again.
Thank you, Jay. I recall a number of years ago when, see, Mom didn't like doctors. She did not like doctors. And whenever we saw a doctor, it was all new to us, and it was very exciting. I remember once Dr. Thomas came out to our home to give some shots. And I thought that was the most cruel thing that I'd ever seen, when he was giving shots to my older brothers. And I didn't get one, but I watched him stick that needle into my older brothers, and I thought that was the meanest thing that I'd ever seen. And I never did like that doctor for that, because my older brothers, he made them cry. And so, and it was all new to me. And I remember Benny went to the hospital to have his tonsils taken out. And he was the only one that I'd ever seen go to the hospital, except us, being born. But Ben went to the hospital, and when he come home, we had to know all about what happened to him at the hospital, because it was all new. And so, so we Packards, we've kind of relied on the guardian angel to take care of us, I guess. And we've done some very dangerous things in our lives. And we've stuck our necks out. And to some of us, I think it might be telling on us a little bit. Okay, Beth, can I have you just take a moment? Everything is okay with you?
Everything is wonderful. Okay. I mean, Cleo's happy. She's content. Good. She goes to temple every week with us, and she works in Relief Society. There's no need of taking time for it. I just want to mention, however, that for Bernie and Sarah and Jay and Barbara, we came up to Ilona's night before last. We got there, and those little kids have never met Bernie and Sarah, nor Barbara and Jay, but they never miss a prayer that they don't include. They're little kids, and I'm sure that's the case all over the family.
I think all of the family. Whenever we kneel down, have family prayer, and our special boy David, and you've got to realize that David now is over 30 years old, and yet he's just a child at heart, no choice companion, but he'll always remember Sarah and Jay.
And Barbara.
And Barbara, yeah, he'll remember Barbara and Bernie, that they'll be able to handle it and take care of it okay, and that it won't be, and those are very special prayers to us. And I find myself calling on this special boy to offer the prayer quite often. And so, because he's a special boy. And moving on.
Might I just make a suggestion?
10 o'clock. It's 10 o'clock. Let me just go, yes.
A positive attitude. 65 instead of 85. Positive attitude helps a lot.
Yes.
Well, that's what the brethren are even talking about, not be negative.
Before I turn the balance of the time over to Ronald, let me read a special statement that was put in the Deseret News in reference to our beloved President Hinckley. Let me just read it to you, and I think you'll get a message that is going to be very important. And then I've got copies to hand out to each of the heads of the family. I think you'll want them to pass this information on to your children, your grandchildren. President Hinckley says parents are key to averting moral crisis. And then he goes on, and it says this: like a prophet of old warning kingdoms to repent, President Gordon B. Hinckley of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints warned diplomats and politicians, but mostly parents, that the world faces moral catastrophe unless they act quickly. And he said the way to avoid that disaster is simple. Parents must take the time to teach and learn with their children, work together, read together, and pray as families. President Hinckley, first counselor in the church's first presidency, said if families will follow those 4 simple steps, beginning with children when children are young, we can begin a moral turnaround within a generation and can achieve wonders in 2 generations. But he warned the world cannot continue the trend we are currently experiencing without some sort of catastrophe awaiting us. President Hinckley made the comments Saturday at a banquet where he was given the Distinguished Public Service Award by the BYU Management Society of Washington, D.C. Among guests were ambassadors and diplomats from 20 countries: Bulgaria, Botswana, China, Croatia, Cyprus, Egypt, Greece, Hungary, India, Kuwait, Madagascar, Mongolia, Pakistan, Romania, Russia, Singapore, Slovenia, Sri Lanka, and what?
Sri Lanka.
Oh, okay, you didn't put a dash there. Sri Lanka and Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe.
How's our mission there?
Okay.
Used to be Rhodesia. Yeah.
President Hinckley was honored for his full-time work for the church since 1937. Hinckley said, during that time he has seen the world achieve technological wonders, but we are experiencing moral and ethical disaster. He said, while President Clinton and Congress call for more police and prisons and other anti-violence measures, I am rather confident they will not substantially alter the picture, because they are not getting at the root of the problem. President Hinckley said strengthening families would get at the root, and that families should return to the days when they read, worked, and prayed together, which resulted in learning responsibility and respect for others. A troubled home leads to a generation of troubled children, he said. President Hinckley also warned that families must take the lead to make any moral turnaround. There will be little of help from other sources, especially public schools. They have largely abandoned the teaching of values. He said the church can be a help and can do wonders if the government will leave it unfettered, and said churches may become among the last great reservoirs of values. President Hinckley said that better teaching by parents could help show that all people are children of God and should be respected, which could vastly reduce the discrimination and end such crimes as date rape. He said Yugoslavia probably dissolved into racial civil war because too many families for generations taught hatred instead of respect for other groups. He said more reading could expose children to higher thoughts and values that are found on most television shows, and said he decries the filth, the rot, the violence, and the profanity that spew from the screens into our homes from too many shows. He urged parents to keep the TV addiction by reading more and being more selective on the TV. President Hinckley said he worries that by ignoring traditional values in modern life, we are slipping back into the jungle.
What article is that, Bill?
Before we go,
I need to change him.
why don't we all go into the other room for a minute for just a little break, and you'll actually change him right here.
Or you can all go down.
We want to ask him questions and so forth and keep him going.
Well, before I get into that, I want to just take a little bit of time to thank all of you for helping as we organized this. I think we were ultimately inspired as we changed it from January to this conference. To you who didn't get the word from me that there was a change, my sincere apologies. We thought we had informed everybody, but obviously we didn't. I want to thank also the committees that helped to organize it. Bob with the activities and organizing this meeting and all the other activities. Bill, of course, and his family have done a magnificent job of arranging the food service and so forth. You might be interested to know that they have their own little still in the back for that brew that we drank tonight. It was excellent. And then I want to tell you that this has been an absolutely exquisite evening. I have attended, Gene and I, as many of you have attended all the sessions of conference. This is like a sixth session of the conference, only it was the very best session of all. It was absolutely the most inspiring experience I've had in a long, long time. I've wept a lot this week as I've sat through conference and come down and visited with Barbara and Jay and Sarah and Bernie today and others. It's been a weepy time for me, and I'm all wept out perhaps, but it has been a glorious, glorious evening. I am convinced, absolutely convinced, that love in our family has been its hallmark. Each of us in our own way have the kind of love that we've heard Bernie and Sarah express and Barbara and Jay express tonight. And that makes us a rather remarkable family. Let me tell you, I've been with the brethren for the last 3 days. Met with President Monson and other brethren before the conference began. And then many of the brethren, as Bernie will attest, comes up to Gene and I, and they express their deep love and appreciation for our family. They know who we are. There's people all over this church that are influenced by Packards and families of Packards, and they know who we are, and they know who you are, and in all parts of at least this country, people are being blessed because of the love that we have for one another and in our family and the rather unusual family we have. And yet I'm also persuaded that we have not any of us experienced the final love story that is to unfold in our lives. I'm convinced that as much as Gene and I have felt love for one another and as we've felt this love permeate into our children and into our grandchildren, that we have yet to experience our great love affair as Bernie and Sarah are now having and as Barbara and Jay are now having. And really the greatest love story is yet to be written in most of our lives. And that's really probably to prepare us for the time that we are ready to leave. I think that we are really moving as individuals, as couples, as families, as we get older and as we experience these kind of experiences. I think we're moving more toward a Christ-like life in our personal lives. I am. Since July 16th of last year, I am absolutely convinced that I am much more Christ-like now than I was before I had my little experience. And I think that's really what we have to learn how to do, is to have these kinds of experience and become more Christ-like because of them. I really am impressed with what's going on. When I was a bishop, and many in this room have been bishops, I didn't pray for members of my ward to have these kinds of experience. You wouldn't do that. But boy, I loved them when they came, because the spirituality of the ward just grew by leaps and bounds when we had a family in our ward that were having these kinds of experiences. I mean, they just made a Zion out of our ward. we just felt like we were ready to be taken up sometimes when we found our sisters and our brethren totally enmeshed in somebody else's lives. It was wonderful. And our family is kind of feeling that having that opportunity right now. And I think it's doing things to this family. It really is. Good things, the right things, some things that probably we couldn't get any other way. And I'm convinced, absolutely convinced, that we are having experiences, some of us vicariously a little bit because it's coming through others, the few that are really on the firing line, but we are having experiences that we couldn't get any other way. Maybe that's part of the reason, Jay, why you've had your struggles, because we may not be able to get some things happening in our lives without you going through what you're going through, and without having an evening like tonight. And so we're grateful, deeply grateful for the way that you're receiving your burdens and the way you're moving through your Gethsemane. And I hope that, and frankly, we're all going to have it. We know that. Each one is going to have it a little differently, but every one of us, not a single one of us is going to get out of this life without having our Gethsemane. And it'll be different for each one of us. But I hope the way we accept it, and the way we live with it, and the way we deal with it, the way we use it to improve and spiritualize and develop Christ-like attributes, I hope we'll all do that the same way. I'm so grateful for Barbara and Jay and Bernie and Sarah. It's been a magnificent evening. And I feel like that if I went into anything that I had been assigned to do, it would be going from the sublime to the ridiculous. It really would be. And so I'll be brief, very brief. But in a way it does tie in, because of what the brethren have said as we've listened to conference.
Well, Ron, the brethren are anxious enough to hear it from you. Whatever report, whatever current affairs, whatever alarm we need, whatever we need. So we'd like to hear it.
I'll be brief, but again it ties into what I consider the most significant problem the world is struggling with today. And certainly the United States and our government is even having a greater struggle with it. And that's something that you've heard all week and tonight relative to families. There is no question that the biggest problem that we have in the world today is the deterioration and the total almost abandonment of our value system. And that is my greatest concern. It's not my colleagues' greatest concern. In fact, most of them absolutely don't give it much thought at all. And that may be that may be even more reason for us to be concerned. I am deeply concerned about much else that's going on in government, but obviously that's the most of greatest concern. But that is more what we've heard from the church, and I won't dwell on that. I would like to dwell on that because I think, again, that's where the world has to make its greatest changes. But that's not the area where our family needs to make, or the church needs to make its greatest change. So I won't dwell on that tonight and talk about things that are probably not quite as important, but are deeply important to us and our future and to the future of this country. I'm just about 3/4 the way through a book that I've been reading. In fact, it's out in the trunk of Don and Kenneth's car where our luggage is, in my briefcase. It's called Bankruptcy 1995. I believe that the message of the book, it's written by Figge, Henry Figge, I believe, is a world-renowned economist. I believe that the message of the book is absolutely on target. I believe the timing may be a little bit off. I don't think we will have economic chaos and catastrophe by 1995. That's just next year. But I do believe that if we do not change the direction that this country is going, and that the world is going, because if this country goes down economically, the world goes with it, no question about it. I am absolutely persuaded that and I'm not an alarmist, I never have been, Juan would be, more so than I am, But I have not been, I've always looked for the positive side of our government and our country, but now I am beginning to be deeply, deeply worried. I believe that if we do not change the direction we're going with our economic policy, we're headed for national bankruptcy unequivocally. There is no question about it. Now, we may have the courage and the ability to make the changes that have to be made. I have to admit to you that Bush and Reagan, as much as I admired and appreciated them and loved them as presidents, I worked with them rather closely, were not able to bring about the changes that this country was demanding. The deficit went up substantially under Reagan. The debt went up in a huge manner under both presidents. So I can't lay it on the Democrats. I can't lay it on anybody. It's just that we have not been able to get it done. I ran for office about 11 years ago, or at least for Congress, for the first time. We were alarmed during that campaign that we had reached a $1 trillion national debt. And it's the national debt that is the accumulation of all your annual deficits. The annual deficit, that is the amount that we spend in government over and above what we take in government, is your annual deficit. And that added all together over all the years, as far back as you want to go, has added up at that time to $1 trillion. A huge, huge debt. One that was of great alarm 11 years ago. In the last 11 years, we have increased that debt through annual deficits to where now we have a debt of about between $1.5 and $3/4 trillion. In other words, we've more than quadrupled that debt in the last 10 years. If we continue to add to the debt through annual deficit spending at the same pace that we have the next decade that we have the last decade, we will have a debt of about $12 to $15 trillion. The interest on the current debt, that is on that $4.5 trillion debt, the interest that the government pays on that is now sucking up about a fourth, between a fifth and a fourth of all the revenues that come into the federal government from all sources. Your taxes, corporate taxes, fees, and all kinds of revenues coming into the federal government. All added together, it takes almost a fourth of those revenues to pay just the interest on the $4.5 trillion debt. If you have a $12 to $15 trillion debt, that will suck up about 35 to 40% of all revenues. And we right now do not have more than 15%, more than what we're now spending. We do not have more than 15% of discretionary monies. All the rest of the budget is going out to entitlements, to required payments, payments that the Congress really doesn't have any options or choice. They simply are automatic payments. The debt is one of them, or the interest on the debt is one of them. The entitlements, which all your social network programs are a part of it. The military, there are contracts out to build military hardware that extended over, say, 5 to 10 years, and those contracts have to be paid. And at the end of the 5 or 10 years, you have a piece of weapon system, high-tech stuff. The federal employees that are employed to run the government, your military employees, those are automatic payments that we don't have choice on. We can cut maybe a COLA, a cost of living increase, but essentially those are huge chunks out of the budget that we can't vote or change or really alter to any great degree unless, again, getting back to the book, the bankruptcy book, unless we change the direction the government is going. That means that we'd have to readdress deficit, or rather readdress entitlements. We'd have to reevaluate our military commitment. We'd have to in other words, we'd have to change the expenditures of this country and of this government. Heretofore, we've not had any even show of a willingness to do that. And it's not just a partisan issue, although we try to make it a partisan issue back there. It's a bipartisan problem, and it truly is a country's problem. Well, if you had a 5 or a 10 or a 12 to 15 trillion dollar national debt in 10 years, again, we would not even have sufficient monies in our budget to pay the interest. And that doesn't even pay off the debt. Not a dime's worth of that interest goes for education or for Social Security or any of the other programs. And so we are headed for national bankruptcy. Now, what should we do? I am not, again, alarmed only in that I know that if we don't prepare for that day and pray that the Congress will have the courage to change, but assuming that they won't change, that they would rather be re-elected than to try to find a way to stop the hemorrhaging and stop the government from going headlong into bankruptcy, and thus we would all be into chaos, not just in this country, it would be a global problem. Then if we cannot muster that kind of courage, then we will find that we won't change the direction we're going. That means that you and I have got to prepare for it. I don't have any magic or insider information relative to what you should do but I should say I cannot conceive that debt will work to your benefit. I would have to say that you would be wise to follow what the brethren have been saying for some time. Church, for the most part, has not paid a great deal of heed to it, but that is, get out of debt and stay out of debt. And the only debt we ought to have, if we, at our age, it would be perhaps some residual debt on your home. I don't believe there's probably very much other debt. And some of you probably got your home paid for. I hope you do. And I hope you'll hasten the day when it is, if it's not. But I think that you ought to, because you could lose everything. When things go down, they'll go down quickly. I do not expect it to be a long, lingering bankruptcy that'll be filed and then fought and then debated. I think it'll go down without Congress even being aware of what's happening. It could happen on a weekend, because all you'd have to do is have a crumbling of the stock market, and people could then go into almost crisis reactions, and before you know it, it's done. It's done. There is no way that the banks, the government, or anyone could bail it out. We are so heavily in debt. We are in the process of bailing out so many different areas now that there's no way we could absorb a major crisis. And therefore, your property, your home, could be the only thing you could be left with. All your other investments could disappear very easily and very quickly. And frankly, you'd be much better off than most Americans and perhaps most people in the world if you had a home that you didn't have to make heavy payments on. You'd probably be able to survive better than the vast majority of the citizens of the world. And so that would be my major counsel to the family, is do whatever you can to get out of debt and help your kids and your grandkids get out of debt. And then spend very, very carefully. And don't go into debt for anything you don't have the money to pay for, or that you don't need. And then I'd just follow what the brethren have told us relative to preparing for emergencies. Keep your storage, and be willing to live off from it. I could talk to you about health care. I could talk to you about welfare reform, all of which is on the docket for this year. I could talk to you about the crime bill and a variety of other things that we are going to be addressing this year. But I can't tell you anything that's probably more important than that. I'm on the Appropriations Committee now. That's the committee that spends the money. All the rest of the committees, they authorize the spending. They determine where our priorities ought to be. But it is our committee that decides if we're going to spend it on those priorities or not. I'm seeing a little bit of daylight, a tad of hope in my committee from both parties. Mainly the Democrats, I give them credit right now, because frankly, we are seeing probably a more concerted effort to address the deficit and the priorities of spending in the government than I did even with Reagan and Bush. And I think the reason is because partisan politics gets in the way of making the right decisions in Washington. It happens all the time. And up to this point, before President Clinton went in, the Democrats had a majority in both the House and the Senate. They were not at all willing and would actually sell the country down the tube, really. They would rather see a recession in California and across the country that we've already trying to climb out of now. They would rather push the government or the country into an economic crisis than to give President Reagan a victory or something that would give him a plus. The same with Bush. And thus we were never able to get the agenda that we had through because they had the majority in both the House and the Senate. And we couldn't pass what we thought was a correction of the direction. With Clinton now in office, and to be honest with you, still with a majority in the House and the Senate among his party, they can get things done without our votes, frankly. Now they're having their struggles, and you read about it all the time. But they are very much aware that if they're going to change the direction, the economic direction of this country, they're in a better position to do it than anybody has been in the last 12 years. And I believe that's true. Some of them are really trying to make that effort. I give them credit. I will be there to help them. I'll vote with them when I can to bring about those things because many of them are Republican concepts and rise, frankly, and should rise above partisan politics anyway. So that's really where we're at. I believe that you watch probably this year and next year, I think will be barometer years for you to watch. And if we have not made significant strides and genuine strides in reducing our deficit spending, then I would be very much concerned if I were you.
What about where we live?
I would and ask me if we're making that genuine strides, because you will read in the papers and the media will report that we have brought our deficit from $400 billion this year down to, say, 350, and then the next year down to $190 billion. And I'll be able to tell you whether that's smoke and mirrors or whether it's genuine reductions. See, there's some favorite tactics that they're already starting to use. Those who want to continue the spending because they feel that we can absorb it. There are some genuinely people that feel in the Congress that philosophically feel that we have such a remarkable resilience in this country in terms of GNP, our ability to produce commodities and goods, and that when you take our deficits and put them in the context of that huge machine that produces in this country, the best in the world still, that therefore we don't really need to worry about that deficit because our ability to produce will offset that. That is bad policy. But they, in order to help them fulfill that policy, and they genuinely believe it, they're not just...
Well, it's worked so far.
It has.
Sure.
And so they genuinely believe that there isn't the worry. That they will then, in order to camouflage that huge deficit to allow the people to feel a little better, they are now proposing that we take many of the big spending items off budget. Off budget. The health care, huge package that the Clintons have introduced. They're saying about $100 billion a year more than what we're now spending on health care. But the real people that know the facts say it's closer to 100 or to 250 to 300 billion dollars a year added to the existing deficit. You take that off the budget, that one item alone, and you can change a $400 billion deficit to $150 billion just like that. One item off budget. That's all smoke and mirrors. And it all adds to the debt at the end of the year. It will all be added to the national debt, but they will show it as a modest deficit, or even a deficit reduction from the year before. And that's what they will do, and they're talking now about taking that off budget, even Social Security off budget, and a few other big-ticket items. And it only takes a little bit of smoke and mirrors to really deceive the American people into thinking that we're making progress in the right direction, that we have changed the direction, economic policy direction of the country, when in fact the debt is still growing at the same pace, even though the figures that they show for deficit spending that normally you would use to add to the debt at the end of the year are skewed. So in that respect, you won't get the true facts as you read your newspapers. You'll have to get it
But
from...
there's certain people, Ronald, that will disclose that. See, there's...
That's correct, and that figures that we believe that we can have access to the actual figures.
I was going to ask, why can't there be somebody in the know come forward and speak to we the people and tell us the truth of what's happening?
We try, but the media is in the pocket of those that want to deceive and want to cover, because they also are very, very they don't want to cut back on our social spending agenda, because they are socialists, many of the people in the media. Yeah. And so they actually, they become accomplices in the deception.
Yeah.
And of course, they're the ones also that give the huge contributions to many of those liberals that are the big spenders. And so they are accomplices of it. And they would not therefore reveal the facts and the truth, and they become a part of the problem. I'm finished with what I want to say.
Well, if they cut back, on some of those...
Let me hear Bernie first.
If they cut back on some of those programs, like try to pull back on some of the welfare programs, they're just simply going to lose their votes, and they're not going to give up those votes for anyone.
Well, and the sad part is, Bernie, is that the American people, they speak a good line when they become frustrated with their elected officials. But the fact is that group after group are saying essentially, we need to make these cuts. We need to change the economic policy of this country, but don't cut my program.
All the senior citizens are going to keep wanting.
Absolutely, they're huge. And so, but it's not just seniors. It's your school teachers. It's your military. It is every group that will say the same thing. We absolutely applaud you for even talking about making cuts, but when it comes to their program, we get, I was going to say millions, I don't get millions, but I get thousands of letters on a weekly basis saying, don't cut mine, and some of them become very angry. If you cut my COLA, my Social Security COLA, or my federal employee retirement pay, COLA pay, you won't only not get my vote, I will go out in my neighborhood and I'll campaign again. And there's enough people that are worried about re-election that they won't do it.
What I was wondering, what is the scenario as you see it? If the government does go bankrupt, in other words, they can't pay their investors who have invested their money that the government owes to, and then what would happen? What would you see?
You'd have absolute chaos, and it would be quick chaos. It would be a collapse in a matter of just days, perhaps, but certainly not longer than weeks. And the reason is because again, the moment that the signs of that happening over a weekend, where the stock market like last weekend or last week, it went down 200 points over a period of 3 or 4 or 5 days. Now it bounced back, and I'll only use that as a possible scenario. It bounced back on Thursday, this last Thursday, and gained about 9 points, which sent a message of stability. Things are not quite as bad as it looked the previous 5 days when it went down over 200 points, which is about 8%, a reduction. But if the banks or the creditors would have said on Thursday, the day before Good Friday, this last Friday, if they would have said, we're very, very worried. So when the banks open Monday morning, that's tomorrow morning, we're going to have them closed because we think that there could be a run on the banks. All the creditors around the world would begin to be alarmed. And the money you've got in your bank is nothing compared to what our banks are owed by government and what our banks owe foreign governments. And all these countries and all these loans could be called, because their loans would be in jeopardy. And if they called loans of that scale, that's immediate bankruptcy, essentially. And then, of course, you have chaos. The thing that
describe chaos.
Well, I believe that you would have mob violence. I believe that you'd have people you have an earthquake in Southern California that is isolated to a relatively small area. I mean, when you speak globally. You have floods, and we had people running on stores in Southern California to get water. And they would go up and wait in line, and they would reach the point where it was almost mob violence in some instances just to get 2 bottles of water. Now, most of the cases, it was well done. People were polite and kind and recognized that this was not the end of the world.
Social Security
But they
checks
could, and then you could have
Social
mob
Security checks
violence.
stopped, millions of people
Gene
depend
and
on
I, for instance, we have really nothing except really when we retire our our retirement program that we build up by being in Congress for 11 or 12 or whenever we hang it up. It'll be hopefully a little longer than that. But if the government goes bankrupt and our home is not paid for,
You're hurt.
I can't rely on my government to give me what I've earned, but I haven't got a government left that can pay me my monthly payment.
We'll be out
And
there
where will
all
I be?
along.
I will be out there looking for survival just like a good part of the world.
Everybody on Social Security will be
They will not get their check because the government will have no money to send out.
Government workers
And
will be screwed.
and all your retired government people, your military retirement, that's the chaos. And when they start to lose their homes, when they start losing everything they've got,
The banks can't take all the homes.
people have already demonstrated that they will become animals. People become animals under those conditions.
Everybody will be angry.
Those homes could probably remain, and people may be able to live in them, depending, but you're at the mercy of someone else. And they may allow you to live in it to see if you'll work it out, but really they'll belong to someone
Well,
else.
how can it belong to a bank? What can they do with them all?
They wouldn't be able to do them, but legally you no longer have it. You no longer would have it. They could take the title and would.
And do what with it?
They probably would not be able to do much of
Well, they
anything.
may sell it to somebody.
Yeah, I
But
watched it in.
I don't know, but it would all be chaos. That's what I'm saying. I don't know what this
Barbara, I
is.
watched the bank men. I decided one day to go over to this building where they had people all over the building, stacks of bank foreclosures this high.
Hundreds and hundreds of them.
Yeah.
I
They
honestly
would
don't
call
believe
out
we've
and
ever
see if there was
experienced.
a buyer anymore, and then they'd take it back and they.
We have never in this our lifetime experienced, even the 30 Depression, 31.
What would happen?
We have never experienced anything like what would happen under these circumstances. It would be so complete, so total, so chaotic.
Anger would
There
go
were
wild.
still people that had property, that had things. Even our folks were able to survive it during the 30 Depression, the early.
Yeah.
But
They
this
lost
time,
all the
People-
money they had. They
people-
lost it in the bank.
but we lived.
Well, and people's value systems then was they
But-
were still good, honest, decent people.
Yeah.
You
Today
got
we
a
have
bunch
mob,
of animals
we
out
have
there now.
mobs out there without the
What
crisis.
happens when mobs come in and take control?
They would destroy.
Take what they
They
want
would
and
destroy.
Then
The thing
what
that,
do you do
that-
to
under
prevent
mob
it?
violence, what happens?
What control do we
You have destruction. You don't have people working together to try to build your lives and pull yourselves through. You have destruction. You have them tearing down, and we've seen that over and over again in different
Ron,
parts of the world.
I read not long ago that it's even possible that we would have a military takeover of the government.
Well, that doesn't fulfill prophecy.
I know it doesn't. I know it doesn't. It does. Where the government fall apart, and there would be no government, would be mob violence, community against community, somewhat like it's over in Bosnia and those European countries now.
I'm suggesting that if, again, we do not have the courage to make the changes, we can delay it perhaps, but I would not expect it to go beyond the end of this decade, into the next century. I don't believe this is the final winding up scene, though. I think these would be just preliminary things that would lay groundwork for other destructive processes.
I don't know
that we
how many
understand by
of you saw a 2-hour film that was very well documented. It started out clear back in Egypt, went through Nostradamus, clear, ended up with the Revelation, Book of Revelations. But it was extremely graphic about all the predictions, religious and otherwise, all through these years, and they gave what you've just described between 1998 and 2000.
I saw part of it.
Yes, Bud.
Well,
It was, that was just a tiny part of it.
If these things are likely to happen, and according to prophecy they are, then what should each of us do with our basic investments?
I don't know that I could give you any real information, Bud, that is any different than what the brethren have given us over the years.
What's that?
Well, it's of course to store for emergencies, and to get out of debt, and then to
Invest in land.
to plan your investment portfolio so that it deliberately will put you in a preferred position when and if this chaos happens. Gene and I are probably more vulnerable than even any of you would be, because again, we've kind of developed our retirement based upon a government retirement plan, which is not a bad one, incidentally. If it doesn't happen, we will do fine. But we certainly intend to sell both of our homes when we hang it up, and use what we have in those homes. We have one basically paid for, and the other one is about half paid for, and they're both fairly good homes. So we intend to sell those homes when we hang it up, and use the money to be free and clear in the home that we plan to live in the rest of our lives. And hopefully have the rest enough money that we will be able to put it in, of course, prepare for the emergency needs that we have, and then try to help our kids get out of debt, and then probably make some very safe investments if we have any left. Right now, to be very honest with you, because of the problems in this country, and I have no recommendation to make on that, but Gene and I have pulled up virtually all of our modest stock investments, which is our IRA. We have about $25,000 in IRAs all. Jay and Flo have got a lot more than that, I'm sure, and some of you do. But we've pulled that out and put it in the foreign marketplace. We were in Hong Kong this last few months, and in China, and we're finding that the Chinese market and the Chinese economy is absolutely booming. And Hong Kong is the conduit through which all of the trade goes through the Far East and the United States and the rest of the world. Hong Kong is the most vibrant economy in the world.
What's the matter with real estate land?
It's the safest. It's the safest if it's free and clear. If you have carrying power of it, or if it's safe and clear, or free and clear, that's the safest thing there is. Well, right now, I would not suggest California. We're still struggling and the prices are gone down. It might be a good buyer's time. But Utah prices now, from what I've talked, are coming up to where they're almost competitive with the depressed land prices in California. Right. In fact, in some of your lots are selling for not much difference than lots across the street from our homes in California.
Where would you be safer, though?
Well, I don't think you ought to worry about that. I think you're safe where you're living the gospel and where your family is. I would not be overly concerned about the locality of the country. You can raise your family better here in Utah, perhaps, in terms of righteousness, but I don't worry about that. Our families are doing what we ought to be doing no matter where we're living. Bernie's family down in Texas is as good a family as you'll find in the world. And my family in Southern California, I don't think Gene and I could be blessed with a better family. Every one of our kids are doing fine. Not economically, but that doesn't bother us, to be honest with you. Money has gotten to the point where it's not important to Gene and I, period. We've lost over $1 million in the last 2 years. And we're down to where we really don't have much left. But I don't care. I really don't care. Vaughn and Floyd has experienced the same thing. Vaughn doesn't have anything. Doesn't even have a home left. But do you think he's worried about that as he goes to work at the temple every day? We don't worry about that anymore. Money's not very important to us. And I love that feeling. I love it when I don't have to worry about money anymore.
Well, let me tell you, he doesn't have to worry about the money because I paid the bills.
Well,
I paid the taxes.
But we're like Barbara. We have sufficient for our needs.
He doesn't.
And that's really what matters. I guess what I'm trying to say is, don't worry where you live to see if you can do better there, or it'll be safer there. California's not going to slide into the sea, and if there's an earthquake and it happens in my area, I don't know that if I'm going to go that way, I would go up here in Utah by an elevator accident or something.
There's going to be a biggie coming in Utah. So
I don't know that you can plan. for catastrophes that may be in the last days. And I don't think we ought to bother about that. You just live the way we're living now and get your kids and grandkids to do the same, and you'll be all right.
Let me mention one thing. You know, I've often, it's wondered about why were the Nephites, that 2,500 Nephites were gathered together at the temple when the Savior appeared to them. Who told them to gather there? They must have been close to the leadership of the church. That was Nephi III. And the others, the 12 disciples were chosen from that group. Evidently they knew that they should be at that place. In other words, they followed the counsel of the brethren.
And before that, Dee, you're very much aware that there was massive destruction going on.
All around.
And there's no place to hide from that destruction.
But they were there.
Except righteous homes. And those righteous homes were the ones that later gathered because they survived destruction no matter where they
were. The wicked were taken away. Now, I think, and what brethren are telling us, to follow the counsel of the brethren. Right. And I think we follow and stay close to the brethren. And they know that we're getting close to the time of the second coming of the Savior. It's like a mother who is about ready to give birth to a child. Exactly. She doesn't know the day or the hour, but she knows it's close.
That's Bruce R. McConkey's
statement. She knows it's close. And the same way with the brethren. The signs, everything, what you've been talking about, Ron, is one of the major signs that we are to look for. And we know that we're close. And we don't know the time. Even the Savior doesn't know the time of the day.
Let me conclude with a story.
Well, let me mention something too, Ron.
All right, then we're going to stop.
It just might be that this is exactly what we need as a nation and as a world in order to accomplish what needs to be done, is to humble the people so that they can join the church as it's being prophesied. This world, it needs humbled.
And it may be some of our Gethsemane that some of the families are already going through. It may be the catastrophes that some of us will have to really take us toward a Christ-like life. I really believe that. Let me tell you one story that happened that will illustrate a point I want to conclude on. There was a bill. It was the Religious Freedom Act last year, actually 2 years ago, that was drafted up to address the peyote problem that the Indians had used in their ceremonial religious ceremonies. And they were promoting this Religious Freedom Act along with other groups to allow them to continue to use peyote, a hallucinating drug, as part of their religious ceremonies. I had some real problems with the bill because peyote does not fit into my whole idea of what ought to be the motivation of good law in terms of freedom. Using hallucination drugs, I also felt, in fact, there was indications that there would be those, for instance, the abortion, those very emotional abortion people that would want to organize under the Religious Freedom Act their own religion, and that abortion would be a tenet of their religion, and therefore under the act they would be able to practice abortion without any constraints, without paying any attention to the laws of the country, local, state, or federal. And so I thought this is not a good law, and I opposed it. And Marcus Faust, a very prominent attorney in Washington, D.C., the son of James E. Faust, and a dear friend of mine, came in and lobbied me in my office and says, "We think you ought to support this bill because the church has some concerns about people returning to the oppressions of the church and some of its doctrines that may seem as strange to them as peyote does to you and others." And I said, I just can't buy it. And so I told him I still don't believe I will support the bill. I got a letter about 3 weeks later from the first presidency, first time in my career as an elected official, where I got a letter from the first presidency where the church was taking a position on a piece of legislation. And they were taking a position of support of the Religious Freedom Act. It took me just 5 seconds to change my position. Because when the brethren speak, the debate is over. There is no more reason for debate for Latter-day Saints. I not only voted for it, of course, later on it passed, but I was very supportive and helped get others to vote for it too. And I guess that's the message I would like to leave in the potential crisis that's out there. Don't argue among yourselves or among other members or among other groups over what we ought to be doing or whether this is what the brethren really want us to do it. Wait for the brethren to speak. When they speak, the debate is over. You have your marching orders, and I know Packards well enough to know that we'll go right down the middle of that road. We won't be over on the fringes. We won't be over on this side. We won't get radical on it. We will be right down the middle. And that's why the brethren think that the Packard family is such a remarkable family. It's because wherever they've been exposed to them, and that's all over the church, they find that they're the members, they're the ones that are right down the middle. That if the brethren speak, they don't debate it, they don't worry about it. And the intellectualism and all the concerns that the brethren are struggling with right now, and we're hearing a little bit of it out in some of the talks and conference, President Hinckley's talk at the end of priesthood meeting last night, all of these are to deal, and as a result of those people that are out there on the fringes. And they love the members that just listen to the brethren, and then they follow. They just follow them. And I guess that's the thing that Packards do the best. And that's what we've got to continue to do. And we'll survive it. If we don't, it'll be our appointed time. We're promised that. And I don't worry about that. And the government can crumble, it can falter, and it can struggle, it can hang, as it were, by a thread. And the Lord will have all that in His control, and that's why I can live with myself back there. That's why I can sleep at night, and I do. That's why I don't worry. And I don't really get all uptight if I can't change things. Because I'm just there for damage control.
If we know that the Lord wants it to happen, how should we react? See, I mean, it's just so possible that that's exactly what the Lord would like to see happen to this nation.
I don't think the Lord wants it to happen, but He knows it's going to happen.
He's allowing it.
He will allow it, and then He'll take advantage of it, just like He did in Book of Mormon times and every other destructive time. He takes advantage of it, and we want to be on that side of where we receive the advantage. Well, I want you to know that this is a magnificent evening. I've been so spiritually uplifted this week. I wish I could come to every conference and we could have this every time. We love you, we're grateful for you, and we're looking forward to it. Well, when we're here, you want to. But when we leave and when we get back to our families and all the things we've got to do, we find that it's hard to do. So we don't think that it's wise to have it once a year. Thank you very, very much.
Maybe in that it's the last days, maybe we should have.
Okay, thank you, Ronald. Some of us are going to have to leave right away.
We got all night. Take your time, Bill.
Dee, do you have...
I've already said what I thought of saying. That is, brothers and sisters, stay close to the brethren and hearken what they say to us. And above all, don't criticize or don't take exception. But when they speak, it's like Ron said, when they speak to us, we better listen. That's my philosophy, and I'm like you. I just get out of bed.
Don't get caught up in these modern attitudes and philosophies, especially you gals. Don't get caught up in your women's movements that are going on. They are the devil. They really are. The brethren have got the right idea, and I think the world is beginning to recognize that.
I think we'd get caught up in
No, I don't. I don't think. But there are children and grandchildren that we need to carry that same on.
Right.
We have really learned that it's very easy to get swayed by some people over into these very fringe groups. All of them are very beautifully designed to take them right out of the church, to lose their families, to lose everything that's dear to them.
You know, just a comment a little bit about what Ronald said. Joy and I were reading the scriptures the other day, and we run across one, and then I searched and found it in 2 other places, 3 places in especially the Doctrine and Covenants, 2 by the prophet Joseph. Repeated himself twice in the same chapter, where he says, and the time will come when the love of many will wax cold with no affection. And I have seen in the last while people becoming meaner to people. They're not nice. They're vicious. Some of them are vicious. And And I learned a great lesson from this man right here, Jay Kunzler, just recently when he told us of what had happened to him as he was driving down the road. And he became impatient because the car in front of him was driving slower than the speed limit, and was just taking its time. And he says, and he was impatient, and he wanted to go around him, and he wanted to honk his horn. He wanted to swear at him. He wanted to tell him what he thought.
Not swear.
And tell him what he thought. Tell this person what he thought. And pretty soon there was a place for him to go by. And as he went by, it was L. Tom Perry and his wife just enjoying the afternoon drive. And and I learned a great lesson there, that even on the highways, when we work and meet with people and do things with people, just keep our cool. And we have found it necessary. We have found it necessary to visit with all of our grandchildren and go through that message that our late Elder Ashton gave on bashing. Remember it? On bashing. We have found it necessary to go through that with all of our grandchildren. And of course on the one on pride that President Benson gave. Those two, and just stress to them, let's be kind to each other. Let's us as brothers and sisters be kind and considerate and respectful to each other. Love each other. Let's not let that die ever. But let's especially teach it to our children and our grandchildren. I've heard some say, I have raised my kids, they can raise theirs. That is not true. As grandfathers, I have a responsibility to my grandchildren. And I spend a lot of time with them and help my children with their children. I hope this will be the case. May the Lord bless each and every one of us in our responsibilities. We express our love, Joanne and I, to each one of you. I'm sure you express your love to each. May the Lord bless you, I pray in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. I would like to say one or two words.
Wendell?
We go clear back, I go clear back to Heber J. Grant. And if we would, Joseph, well, I don't remember his comments. And we've got a lot of the tapes that we bought and reserved. And if we'd have followed the church plan, just on little things, starting way back there, this would be a different nation, or the church would be in much better shape.
We listen to those talks and they count.
Every move that we see taking place in our society today are moves that are destroying our value for life. The sanctity of life is being destroyed in our society by many of these movements. The gay movement, the homosexual movement, the violence, the gangs, all of those are the feminists. They all lead us to a destruction of the sanctity of life.
See, Heber J. Grant encouraged the state of Utah, members of the state of Utah, to vote against liquor by the drink.
You know, I'm convinced, brothers and sisters, that if we're to bind Satan, I mean bind him within the ranks of our families and our homes, if we're going to ever bind him, it'll be through love and service. That will kill him on what he wants to do.
Oh yeah, you said the church encouraged